it's a different way of looking at these themes in the hexagrams
Mm-hmm.
because, as we know, most of this human design work is built around the 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, and so is the gene keys. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll just start where at the beginning to try and make sense of it and where it differs from human design. Human design reveals who you are energetically and who you came here to be. I'm Dana, human design specialist.
And I'm Haley, the human design newbie. Listen in as we explore how leaning into your authentic self is your ultimate path to success. Welcome to the Human Design High podcast. Let's get into it.
Hey Haley, how you doing?
Hi.
Good to see you. Just jumped right in there, didn't
I know, it startled me.
I? You're busy twirling your hair, and then you're like, "Whoop, time to get to
I'm
work."
on.
Did it to myself too. Well, we decided to hit record because we were really busy talking about the weather again and how different it is. And anyway, so we got the catching up out of the way. So, well, we better get started because Haley's tired. Just throwing you under the bus there.
I know.
No, you're not too
No.
tired. What have
No.
you been up to today?
Well, we got back from camping.
So you did go
We
camping.
Yes, we did. We were gonna go leave Friday after work and camp through
Mhm.
Sunday.
Mm.
Uh,
But
but
the
like I
dangerous
said,
thunderstorm.
there was a dangerous thunderstorm and we were not ready.
No,
So we
I
got all
mean
of our
business
stuff
out there
packed
in
up.
Colorado.
Yeah. Um, so we got all of our stuff packed up and then left yesterday morning.
Where'd
And
you go?
so we first went to this place outside Woodland Park, which is
Mm-hmm.
like 45 minutes from us. We went because we
Mm-hmm.
were doing dispersed camping. So we were just camping off of forest roads. The
Dispersed camping?
Mhm. Yeah, it's basically it's not like
Teach
when
me
you go to
something.
so it's not like when you go to a campground where a campground you have like maybe access to facilities and water and it's like
My
you
kind of
probably
camping.
will see people a little bit more. Whereas dispersed camping around here, a lot of places you can go dispersed camping is like off of most forest roads, like national
Mm-hmm.
forest roads.
Mm-hmm.
So the first place we tried to go to, uh, it was packed. All the spots were packed.
Uh-huh.
So we went to another place a little bit more north of Woodland Park, and found a spot there. And it was cool because it was an area we hadn't been before. And then the forest road you turned on to, the
Mm-hmm.
first section of it, maybe mile or so,
Mm-hmm.
was through an old burn area. So it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like weird and cool to see like you could see more because all the trees were like sticks or on the ground. Um, and it was like very wide views of the mountains and stuff. And then we
Oh,
went
okay.
further up and found a spot. As Presley said it, we found where the Colorado rednecks are. There were so
Mm-hmm.
many people on like four-wheelers and dirt bikes, and then those like dune buggy looking things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they were going up and down the road all day long, up until like 9:30 at night. They were going
Wow.
on this road. Yeah.
And Bailey was with you or no?
Yes. Yeah,
How
she came with us.
did she enjoy it?
She did until about 3 o'clock when thunderstorms started to roll in.
At night?
No, in the afternoon,
Oh.
yesterday afternoon. And
Oh.
so she didn't like that. She kept looking at us like we were crazy.
Yeah. Well, it is Memorial Day weekend too. I guess there's a lot of people out there.
Hmm.
Same as here usually. There is a lot of people here, but we had a rainy Memorial Day weekend, so much for that. Um well, so you used your new tent camper
Yes.
truck
Roof rooftop
rooftop
tent.
tent and all worked well. Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad you guys got out a little exploring there.
Hmm.
So I don't really have a way to segue into what we're going to talk
All
about
right, then
today,
let's just get to
other than that segue right there.
it.
It's terrible. Um, okay, so we've been kind of digging into a lot of different pieces and parts of the system and whatnot. We've
Mhm.
done the lines and the profiles and the
Mhm.
all of that. And so we're going to take a adjacent route today
Mhm.
and talk about the gene keys, which I know I've referenced before.
Mhm.
And my question is, do you always have hiccups or just when you get on to record?
uh,
Does this happen when you're like on work calls or is it just when you get on here
no.
with me?
No.
Okay. Hopefully that got rid of them. Hopefully I
Probably.
distracted you a little bit.
Probably because usually when someone brings them up, they go away because I get self-conscious about it.
Okay, well, glad I could help out there.
Sorry.
I still don't have the high tech production where I can freely edit out those little hiccups I hear in the background when I'm talking, but that's okay. Love you. Okay.
Oops.
Broke the ice there. Okay.
Oh my god.
So, gene keys. Back to the gene keys.
See, I thought you were gonna ask me something if I knew about them. You're like, do you have the hiccups?
You just this little. Sorry. I have to cut out. I'm gonna have a fit here in a second. Okay. Okay. So, gene keys.
Mhm.
So, gene keys. All right. So, like I said, this is kind of adjacent to human design system. It's
Mhm.
but often used in conjunction with it by most people who start digging into human design and trying to use it for their own personal growth and development, which is really what
Mhm.
we're all trying to do here. Usually you'll start to hear someone will say gene keys and then you'll start tuning your ears to them more. And if you might already be those people out there listening that know all about them, but just humor me as I tried to explain them to Haley.
I don't know. So.
Well, different it's a different way of looking at these themes in the hexagrams because
Mhm.
as we know most of this human design work is built around the 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, and so is the gene keys. So
Mhm.
I'll just start where at the beginning to try and make sense of it and where it differs from human design.
Okay.
So let's just talk about the whole concept of being the creator of your own reality, the architect of your own evolution, as Richard Rudd puts it. Richard Rudd is the creator of the gene keys. He's the one who brought them forth into existence, also through I think it was first brought to him through kind of an experience he had, not as dramatic as
Mhm.
Ra's
Mhm.
experience, but he will say he just kind of when he was in his 20s had this experience of kind of waking up into this higher experience of consciousness, and so it just started to come through, but it's been something he's worked on for many years, kind of writing
Mhm.
out what these gene keys are. And so basically it is based more around the DNA structures, our DNA structures.
Mhm.
So just getting that in the door there. So
Mhm.
when we talk about how we have talked about before, like I said, he says the architect of your own evolution, right?
Mhm.
Um, there has been more and more science that has shown this mind body connection, and studies have clearly shown that we can influence the expression of our DNA, meaning we've talked about epigenetics and everything before.
Mhm.
So there is parts of our DNA that or DNA structures that are fixed, like the ones that tell you or tells your body or tells whatever it tells.
Mhm.
I am not a geneticist, to as you are forming as a human being, things that what cells are going to grow into arms and legs, brains, all
Mhm.
that stuff. That's coded in there. But then there's
Right.
also a lot in our genes that is always responding around
Mm.
us to what information is there. So where this becomes important is they did some studies not that long ago on, it was really in cancer research and brain or breast cancer research,
Mhm.
and the effects the of mindfulness, meditation, these types of thing on our DNA, basically. So the studies have shown that increased mindfulness, meditation, directing your thoughts can actually preserve the length of a uh, telomere. I hope I'm saying that right. From what I can understand, it's telomere. Okay. The telomeres are like these little protective coatings at the end of our DNA strand or chromosomal strands, right? So
Mhm.
chromosome strands, the DNA, and it's got these little telomeres on the end. The kind of like they say like the protective little plastic caps, like at the end of your shoelace. It keeps
Mm.
it from fraying.
That's called an aglet.
Oh, good job. I did read that somewhere, but I can't believe you know that.
I learned that from a cartoon way back when.
Really? And you remember it?
Phineas and Ferb, yeah.
Phineas and Ferb.
It was a whole episode basically on aglets, yeah.
Huh. Well, then this will be very helpful to you right now because
Good.
it
Good.
basically, yeah, those those telomeres or aglets, if you want to call it, they prevent the deterioration of the end of the strands, prevents it from breaking down and shortening. Because when those strands start to shorten, that leads to higher incidences of disease and early death. So we
Mm.
want our chromosomal strands to stay nice and long and intact, right? And they
Mhm.
found that when they did this study, I found this through Scientific American or something like that, that, they did a scientific study on these, I think it was like 88 patients, breast cancer patients,
Mhm.
those that went through a really structured mindfulness and meditation, all this stuff, during 6 weeks. And then some that just changed like diet, had some therapy, and then
Mhm.
ones that didn't, just had the basic six, I think they said like 6 hours of like kind of training how to cope with your cancer diagnosis and all
Mm.
this other stuff, real the control group, which is
Mhm.
Western medicine.
Mhm.
And they found that the two groups that either received the mindfulness meditation or the talk therapy of like dealing with what was happening with the
Mhm.
emotions and all that stuff, they actually found that it increased it's called telomerase, I think, which is the thing that makes, the telomers. It's the compound, or the
Mhm.
hormone or whatever it is. You're getting a real science lesson here. Um, increased production of that, which helped keep the strands protected and intact, and
Mhm.
also reduce cortisol, which we don't want a lot of cortisol flooding the system because that's highly inflammatory in the body. And
Mhm.
so those two groups that received that extra, which basically dealt with emotions and mindset,
Mhm.
they stayed intact. The other group that didn't deal with it, they found that they shortened. That wasn't
Mhm.
as helpful. So that was a study from like over 10 years ago. So I'm sure
Mhm.
there's a lot more now, but you didn't
Right.
come here for me to, relay science to you because
No, that's not why
nobody's
they tune in.
nobody's passing a science exam with that information. Just trying to. My point was, therefore, that how you think and feel and your general attitude towards life
Mhm.
informs your DNA of who you want to be. And so it helps do that for you, which we kind of already have touched on this before,
Mhm.
but we're going to get it specifically to DNA. And so, really, it's a question of asking yourself in your life and in your health, do you want to focus on expansion or contraction? Do you want to,
Mhm.
live a better life, or you just want to take your chances? so the reason I wanted to bring this up about the DNA and the telomeres
Mhm.
and all that stuff is because the gene keys, he talks a lot about DNA structures and codons and things like that. That is what makes up
Mhm.
the DNA. So okay, so that's what the gene keys are based on. It's this connection between these 64 codons in our DNA, which are these programming partners of chemicals, of compounds, of amino acids, and the 64 hexagrams in the I Ching.
I remember the amino acid combos
Hmm.
from my high school biology class.
Oh, well, this is interesting. So, okay, so a lot of what I'm saying here comes directly from the book. So,
Okay.
um, because I mean, the guy can explain things. Sometimes he uses. We'll say one thing about the gene keys. It can be dense at times, not dense in a bad way, but it can. It's. We'll get into
A
it. It's not
lot.
something you just pick up and read in a day. You're not going to do that. Okay, so your DNA, our DNA, is made up of two
Hmm.
strands of
Double helix.
double helix nucleotides.
Hmm.
Oh, and one is a reflection of the other, right? So it's a
Hmm.
perfect reflection of the other. It's a binary pattern that's also the foundation of the yin and the yang in the I Ching. So it's the
Mm.
yin and the yang. There's that opposite, which your genetic code says is made up of four bases, which are arranged in three groupings, right? Groupings of three.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, let me say that right. So each of those groupings relates to an amino acid
Hmm.
and is formed what is known as a codon. And there are 64 codons in your genetic code. So it's these patternings of these groupings of three.
These groups of three, they create the amino acid, and then
Mm-hmm.
the amino acid pairs with the other amino acid to create the double helix.
Man, that would have been great if you'd been here to help me understand that all along. I got it. So similarly,
Yes.
in the I Ching,
Hmm.
okay, there are only four basic arrangements of the yin and the yang. So these are the lines we're talking about all the time, right? We know that there's six lines in a
Hmm.
hexagram, and there's a lower trigram, three,
Hmm.
upper trigram. Okay.
Right.
You see me?
Yes.
And those, if you look at them, they consist, each trigram consists of either broken or unbroken lines. So you'll see like single line, then two lines, there might be a space in the middle, right?
Yes, I have seen that from your books you've showed me.
Right, right. So as we said, those arrangements are also arranged in these trigrams, these little groupings of three.
Hmm.
And so in the same way, with, like you said, with the double helix with the DNA, it reflects and all that other
Hmm.
stuff. Each trigram has a partner.
Hmm.
That would be the reflection of the. Okay. So these two symbols then create the hexagram, the basis of the I Ching, the upper and the lower. We know that. That's what the
Hmm.
so, okay. So there's
Okay.
64 codons in your DNA, and there are
Hmm.
64 hexagrams in the I Ching.
Mm.
And so really they said when someone put it on a wheel and you're able to see it on a wheel, how it all kind of like starts to come together.
Hmm.
So in effect, he says the 64 gene keys are a gene I Ching, a book that talks directly to your DNA.
Say that again.
It's a book that talks directly to your DNA. Because, as we said earlier,
What is the gene key?
the gene keys are a gene I Ching. Gene I Ching. Sounds easier to say gene keys. But basically, which we're going to go into it, what this means. But basically, if we were talking about we can influence our the structure of our DNA, our health, our bodies by what
Hmm.
we are thinking, feeling, saying. Words are very powerful. We've talked about
Hmm.
this before about the power of words.
Hmm.
That's what this book is, basically a code book of consciousness. So when you take these gene
Okay.
keys, these words, I'm going to explain it a little bit better here in a second. This is what
Hmm.
it's doing, is working on your actual physical body, your structure, right? It's kind of shifting things around. So just like when I should also mention, let me pause here for a minute. Richard Rudd actually was a student of Ra Uru back way back in the
Oh.
day, in the very beginning. So he does have a human design basic. I actually have a book of one of his. He's written a couple human design books that have come back out into circulation. The book I have on circuitry, which is really good,
Mm.
which is a guide to circuits, channels, and gates by Richard Rudd for those
Hmm.
human design nuts out there like me who want to read everything. He does have a couple. books, I think two maybe, that have been you couldn't find them for a while, but they republished them recently.
Hmm.
And so there is this correlation between the gene key work and human design, where human design is mechanical, right? We look at it, it's a
Mm-hmm.
guidebook, it shows us things, it tells us how things are operating, like the circuitry and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the gene key work is a more contemplative work. It's not even work. I mean, it's like what they say, it's like human design's like a reading a textbook, and gene keys is like reading poetry. It's like he was a poet, he's just
Oh.
like, it's very different, but
Mm-hmm.
incredibly helpful, especially in shadow work and deconditioning, which we'll get into that in a minute. So here's what I found.
Thank you, Siri. We don't need you. What
What
did
did
she
I even
find?
say?
I don't know. What
Well,
did
it's
she
gone
find?
now, but it said
No.
eight something with working with shadow work. Something that was weird. 8 characteristics or something like that. Wow. Okay. That was a little strange. Okay, so first things first is that you can use the gene keys just with your body graph. Okay.
Okay.
Because your body graph is going to have all your placements on it, so you know
Mm-hmm.
what your gates are. So knowing that a gene key is actually a hexagram, is a gate, right? So the 14th hexagram is the 14th gate, is the 14th gene key. Does that make sense?
Gate, gene key, hexagram, all equal,
They're all
all
the
the
same.
same.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just different systems, how they're using them, but they all correspond. So there's not like a different G key, it's not going to get confusing in that respect. So there's 1
Cool,
through
cool.
64 hexagrams, 1 through 64 gates, 1 through 64 gene keys. Got it?
Got it.
Okay. And what I find this interesting is the traditional human design language, as we've always said, is kind of speaks to the shadow, and there is some shadow
Mm-hmm.
work here in the gene keys. But we've also talked about how quantum human design and Karen Curry Parker's work is about speaking to a more evolved self, or someone who's done a lot more work. Okay, what do we do with this? And gene keys also does this, and in a very different way.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Snuck up on me.
So there's different ways you can work with this book, this teaching. There's the
Mm-hmm.
gene keys book, and then there's going to be some other things we're going to talk about here too that also work with the gene keys book. So the gene keys book itself
Mm-hmm.
is going to be basically what I'm explaining to you here, kind of how it works, its background and everything, and then it has the listing of each gene key and how it expresses. We're going to go into that in a second. So
Okay.
ways you can work with this book: one, you have your own body graph. You can just familiarize yourself with your gates. It's a good way to do that. It is working, like I said, it has its own language, but if you want to get a different perspective or another way of looking at the themes of the gates in your body graph,
Mm-hmm.
this is a great way to help deepen that understanding and that knowledge. You can also just kind of use it like an oracle, meaning you could just kind of open it and read, what page, what gene key does it open up to? What's the lesson I need to learn today, kind of thing? Or what should I
Hmm.
focus on right now in this stage of life? Because remember, that's what the I Ching was also used as an oracle. They would throw the sticks. You're like,
I don't
what?
know the history of it.
Yeah, it's what I'm still learning. But you could use it like a divination tool, like an oracle as well. The I Ching would be, you'd ask it a question and you throw these sticks and it would give you
Hmm.
like a patterning type of thing. I'm not going to get into that right now. Or you could just open an I Ching book to a certain hexagram as well, and it would kind of give you
Mm-hmm.
information about um, what's happening, say, right now, or what you need to focus on. So you could do that too. Or how it's widely used, the gene keys, is he has created these certain sequences of working with the gene keys. And so since you can use your body graph, we know that this is also based on your date, time, and place of birth.
Mhm.
If you want to go to the website to get what he calls a hologenetic profile, that's what he calls the, because it doesn't look like a body graph. It's going to be
Mhm.
different, but
Mhm.
the hologenetic profile will show you these different sequences that he likes to work with. He says that can help awaken inside of you what the gene keys are here to help you with. I know you're like,
Okay.
okay. That's why we waited a while to talk about gene keys to get you used to talking in this language. But
Okay.
so he says that there's this golden path when working with the gene keys, and it consists of like an activation sequence, which he calls your genius. So in this one teaching of the gene keys, the activation sequence is really looking at your four gates of your incarnation cross, basically,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
working with those energies. And then he also has what he describes as a Venus sequence, which is all about opening your heart and relationships. And that is a lot more uh, different planetary placements within your hologenetic profile or your body graph, whichever way we'll call it, that uses different planetary placements that he has in a specific sequence, and that you contemplate and you go along, and that's about opening your heart more, which
Mhm.
then he says you could move on to the next sequence, which is the pearl sequence, which is how really you're meant to attain prosperity in this lifetime through your service. So it's like saying you need to know your prime gifts, you need to, or your genius, you need to heal your heart and your relationships so you can be um, a person who leads with love and
Mhm.
service to attain your own prosperity and what that looks like for you. So that's the sequencing of it, which is
Mhm.
no short path or no small thing, but that's just,
No.
yeah, because basically what the gene key shows us is we all have our unique genius, which we talk about this a lot in human
Mhm.
design work,
Mhm.
and we're here to share this with the world. And it shows us how we can play our part in transforming the world. And so, like I said, the gene keys are like a code book, which helps
Mhm.
you unlock your genius within you.
Okay.
It's kind of like your energetic blueprint is you are the seed. It carries the seed within you.
Mhm.
It's already there. It just kind of needs to be nurtured, tended to help it flourish and grow. And
Okay.
so he says that by that golden path of going through those sequences I just listed off
Mhm.
helps you do that. So that's what his work is about.
Okay.
So a lot of the languaging in the gene keys language and understanding of it is rooted in the shadows, in fear,
Mhm.
mainly because, and this is where I find it interesting, is because it is so tightly woven in our DNA through our, we talked about our epigenetics before,
Mhm.
ancestral trauma and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And there is that definite side where, and I think this is what's really interesting when you're talking about this and contemplating the whole shadow side of things, is a lot of times we don't know the shadow, or that we're operating from a shadow perspective, because it may not even be ours. It like I said, it's so rooted in our DNA. Some of these fears are so coded in our DNA. They've been passed down for generations because
Mhm.
that's what helped us survive, right? That was our primary sense of awareness, was in the spleen,
Fear. Yeah.
fear.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so what he says in this book is it takes a lot of courage, and anybody who's done any kind of work like this knows that it takes a lot of courage to look at what that fear is, look at what those shadows are, and choose to go through it, to pass through it, to get to
Mhm.
the other side. So Richard Rudd says that, we're, and I think we all know this, we've been talking about it ourselves, that we're going through a great change, a great evolution as a
Mhm.
human, as humans.
Yeah.
And obviously we've talked about the upcoming shifts and the body graph that's coming up in 2027, all these things. And we know we're going from that more left brain, logical reasoning, making
Mhm.
decisions with the mind, to the sensing, feeling, creating through emotion. And so the gene
Mhm.
keys can kind of help you get in touch with that, and really, because the gene key work is like, well, it's not work really, but it's not something that you can just mental your way through. It is a contemplative contemplative body of work, let's call it. It's like I said, it's not a normal book. You just read it. It actually has purpose behind the words and what he's talking about there, and the words he used to help penetrate your DNA. So, anyways, so this helps kind of set up the different
Mhm.
words we're using here. So he says that, every cell in the body is always listening and responding to our environment
Mhm.
around us, either through, just what it perceives. And
Mhm.
it's informing our DNA at all times of what processes within the body to switch on or off. It has to do with hormones and everything. So, what a lot of people, most people, myself, did not realize is that DNA is really a salt, and so it's a natural conductor of electricity. Okay,
Mm.
so it's extremely sensitive to electromagnetic waves, and so even a slight shift in your mood can create enough of a signal to trigger a response from your DNA. It's very sensitive, basically. In other words, saying your DNA is very sensitive to the environment and what's happening. Um, so, a negative or a positive thought can generate subtle electromagnetic, which we talk about this all the time,
Mhm. Mhm.
current throughout your body that can stir your DNA into some kind of biological response. Okay, which is what when they're talking about with the breast cancer patients and everything. It's like
Mhm.
they didn't actually do anything physically to their bodies from the outside. They literally just changed their thoughts, their perceptions, their
Mhm.
emotions, and that helped create a biological response in the body, which was positive.
Mhm.
So, anyways, that's just scientific evidence that our moods, our thoughts, beliefs can physically affect our bodies. Okay.
Mhm.
Which makes sense because I believe that a lifetime of stress and negativity and everything else, that creates inflammation, creates a lot of.
I mean, stress alone can create like so wreak havoc in your body, like
Hmm.
physically make you sick.
Yeah, even if you're, otherwise healthy, if you know,
Mhm.
we've seen the people who, eat healthy and exercise, but at the same time have highly stressful jobs or horrible relationships, and they're just, their bodies are responding to that and not so much to
Mhm.
it helps, the food and the diet help for sure, but um so because of this effect of your thoughts and your moods on your DNA, we can say, we're co-creating our body via our attitude. And so your attitude determines the nature of the signals that reach your DNA. This is how he
Okay.
explains it in the book,
Mhm.
which we've kind of touched on that. Okay. This is also the basis of basically the placebo effect, that you could tell someone that you're
Mhm.
giving them something and it's going to help them do this, and that might make them feel more hopeful, make them feel better, and
Mhm.
it can work. Okay, so all in all, what this all breaks down to, and it's what we talk about, it's what I believe 100%, is that you are not a victim of your DNA, you're not a victim of your circumstances, you're a victim of your own attitude and how you perceive things. So no matter what's going on in your life, there is horrible things that can happen, but it's how you choose to move through them, how you choose to process what's happening. I'm not saying that you should always put on a happy face and, go
Mhm.
with that whole toxic positivity thing of just pretending like nothing's happening,
Mhm.
especially if it's something that really needs to be dealt with. But it is, not living in denial. It is processing your thoughts and emotions. It is allowing them to move through them as they should, instead of just like, if you have this negative emotion, negative in quotations, if you have a negative experience, or let's call it that, and if you choose to not process what's actually happening and how you feel about it, then it just gets trapped in your body anyhow.
Mhm.
And that leads to further disease. And so
Yes.
so
Give it time.
that being said, he likes to refer the gene keys as a transmission, something that cannot be grasped with the rational, logical mind. Sure, you use your mind to read the words, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really getting in on a different level. It's a transmission, kind of like, a lot of spiritual texts are kind of like a
It's
transmission.
going back to poetry.
Yes, so he
I
says
don't
that
like
well,
poetry.
this is kind of like, I know, but he doesn't actually write it like poetry. But he's a
But it's
poet,
the
so
whole deeper meaning of it.
he's a bit of a wordsmith for sure. I have had to look up words sometimes that he uses to be like one of the words he used even when I was putting this together was permutation, which I've heard the word before. I think I know what it means, but if I'm going to explain what it means, I have to really look it up. Yeah, it means arrangements.
I have that issue sometimes where I'll say a word or a phrase and Presley's like, what does
Mhm.
that mean? And I'm like,
Why you question
it
me?
means this.
Yeah. Oh, it happens to me all the time. I know the words. I know how they're used, from reading or listening or whatever. I hear them
Hmm.
all the time. I have an understanding of it, but yeah, if you
I know how
if you
to.
asked me actually what it means, definition, no, can't tell you.
Yeah.
So,
The word, the one I remember I had to explain to him was Godspeed. And
hmm,
I was like, it means, like best of luck.
yeah, like got at your back.
It's like
No
I know how to
resistance.
use it. I know when to
Hmm.
use it, but I can't explain it to you.
Well, here's a fun one I just learned the other day. I was
Oh.
listening to NPR, Friends with I don't know, Away with Words, I think it's called. I always say it wrong. The show, drop a dime on them. Drop a dime on them. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't
Drop a
think
dime on
so.
someone. Usually it means give them
Uh-uh.
up or, you know, um, turn someone in. Drop a dime on them.
Hmm.
Well, they said it came from. This is such a sideways thing. Came from back in the day when we all had to use payphones. And if you were going to
Uh-huh.
call in an anonymous tip or you knew where someone was, you had to drop a dime in the phone book or in the
Oh.
telephone so that you could call the police.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Away with words. So back to words and the Gene Keys words. So there are specific word codes. He calls it the spectrum of consciousness around these gene keys, these themes. Okay, because
Okay.
we've also touched on how there might be a theme in a hexagram, but there is a spectrum to what this theme means. There's a lighter side,
Hmm.
there's a darker side. Highly expressed, and now this is where we've kind of touched on gene
Hmm.
key work before.
Yeah.
That there's this spectrum in the word of or in the say like uh, I just drew a blank on all of them. Trying to come up with just one. Anyway, so there's a high expression, low expression. There's somewhere in between. There's all this. This is what we're
Hmm.
kind of familiar with. So there are specific word codes that relate to each of the 64 gene keys. And
Okay.
these words are kind of in these levels, these frequencies that are the shadow frequency, the gift frequency, and the siddhi frequency. Now siddhi is spelled Siddhi. It's a Sanskrit word, siddhi.
I think we've talked about this word before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, siddhi is like that bodhi consciousness. It is the higher consciousness. It is the enlightened consciousness. It is like the perfected form kind of thing. The
Okay.
exalted form of anything is this acidic
So
form of it.
what were the levels
Shadow,
again?
shadow
Shadow.
frequency, gift
Hmm.
frequency, and the acidic
Gift.
frequency. So,
Okay.
so it's kind of like as you it's kind of like neuro linguistic program NLP they've talked about before how you're
Hmm.
using language to affect the brain to affect the outcome sort of thing. So
Hmm.
you change how you speak in NLP. You change how you speak about things in order to help shape new beliefs. They say that
Hmm.
you can always tell when someone is speaking from a belief pattern and how they speak by saying, you always do this, or I never have this, or blah, blah, blah. That's like, oh, that's somebody has a belief going on, right? So
Hmm.
they know what to focus on, how to break down that belief. Well, the gene keys are using that same kind of concept that you use these specifically chosen words and contemplate the shadow, the gift, the city to help, work through the fears and bring you up to a different level to help you deprogram and reprogram your genes. Okay.
Okay.
Are you following along so far?
Yes.
So the goal of the gene keys as a body of work is to deprogram your DNA in the lower shadow frequencies, the lower frequencies,
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
reprogram your cells with the higher frequency patterns of the gifts and then the cities. So you have
Okay.
this gene blueprint based on when you were born, your, you
Right.
know, body graph, whatever you want to call it, your
Mm-hmm.
hologenetic profile. So you have what you're born with, the gene expression you're born with. Environment determines how these have been expressed. So we talk about your lived experience, what's happening, all the conditioning
Mm-hmm.
you've picked up over time, even things that you brought into this lifetime, perhaps through family history, genetics, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then our work here in these systems is to help deconstruct all that and figure out what's truly us, rediscover who we really are. And that's what we are doing here with the gene keys too, is using these words, this highly specific language designed to communicate with your actual genes, with your DNA, to help the process. And it's doing all
Okay.
this basically through contemplation. And
Okay.
so what is contemplation? Contemplation is like, well, meditation is this very passive thing, no thought, no, just you're supposed to have an empty mind or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Concentration is being highly focused and specific to the point of, everything else. We all know what it means to be concentrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Contemplation is a little bit of both. It's like you take the time to read maybe the part of the gene keys that you're led to read, and then you just kind of let it go. You can kind of muse, you can kind of ponder, but sometimes you'll keep coming back to reading the same one over and over again until it really
Mm-hmm.
starts to like click in there. But it's not through reasoning and understanding, it's just through allowing it to kind of be there in your,
It's like
in your
simmering on
body.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, you read it because I'll tell you, the shadows, I think, for each gene key, like if you look at just what your own activations that you have, that you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with, to get a better understanding of them, and you're just um wanting to maybe get a deeper understanding, I'll tell you what, you read those
Mm-hmm.
shadows and the description of it at first, and I've never seen anything that is so accurate as far as
Oh.
describing how it plays out, the shadow frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So it really hit me. So with my sun and earth, because so those would be sun and earth are those programming partners we've talked about before, because
Mm-hmm.
there's always the other side. So if you were to look at the hexagram of the 14 and the 8, they will be reversed of each other, they'll be flipped.
Oh, okay. I got it. Yep. I got what you
Mm-hmm.
mean.
Yeah. First time I realized that, I'm like, whoa, does everybody know this? Look at that. Oh, yeah, obviously. A lot of people know it. I just didn't know it. I figured that out on my own. Anyway, so as an example, the lower frequency of my sun gate is 14. If you
Hmm.
guys don't have that committed to memory yet, I talk about it a lot.
I don't. I don't remember mine. I'm so bad.
I think it's 63.
It's one of those. It's a head gate. I know that
Yeah,
much,
it's a
I
head
think.
gate. It is 60. Okay, so in traditional human design, gate 14 is known as possession in great measure, gate of power skills, they call it also. So in the gene keys, there's going to be 3 words associated with it. The shadow is compromise, the gift is competence, and the city is bounteousness. And so at first glance,
Bounteousness.
bounteousness, bounteousness.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. So what he'll do is he'll break down in each gene key, he'll break down the shadow of this expression, of this
Hmm.
hexagram, of this gene key. And because he says that the compromise here is not compromise, as far as we all make compromises in life. The compromise here is compromising what you know is right for you for the sake of someone else. It's living in
Mm.
this compromised state because 14 is a sacral gate and it's about direction. And he will also say that in the shadow frequencies, that the shadow frequencies are actually what a lot of people consider normal in humans. And that's why I
Mm.
think we can relate to them more readily because we've probably spent more time in this shadow frequency. And so, as we said, because it's based on fear. So he also says that in the shadow, it's going to come out in two different ways. He'll talk about the shadow in general, but then he'll talk about a reactive way of expressing that or a repressed way of expressing this shadow, which
Okay.
gets it even more nuanced. So reactive meaning um it's, or excuse me, repressive is more like on that lower side of it, of just kind of contracting, fearful. And
Mm-hmm.
then there can be a shadow frequency that is more reactive. It carries more anger to it and how it expresses in that way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so say, like in the sense of this compromise in the 14th gate, he would say that the repressive nature is being impotent, meaning feeling like I have no choice, this is just the way the world is, there's nothing I can do about it, so I have to compromise who I am because I don't really have a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the reactive nature he calls in this one is more of a being enslaved. These people are, instead of collapsing into, oh, there's nothing I can do about it, being just powerless, it's like these are people who react by trying to always prove themselves. They become more of a slave to working hard in jobs that aren't really right for them, because this gene key is all about work and all this other
Mm-hmm.
stuff, to prove themselves that they're special. So they're working extra hard against it, but they're not really in the flow of it. So it can be, you can still be in a shadow frequency, whether you're, reactive or feeling repressed. It's just
Mm-hmm.
different ways it expresses. And then the gift frequency, each shadow contains a gift. And so there is this kind of a lower frequency that as you read this and you contemplate it and you think about it, like, oh, you probably recognize things right away. Well, we might tap onto yours. I don't know. We'll see. How about you? And not just in your sun and energies
Mm-hmm.
and all. This is all throughout the chart.
Right.
What this gives way to is the gift is the, as the vibration, the frequency rises up, this gift expression of yourself can be experienced more frequently. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is where I like to say this spectrum, because between these two, the shadow and the gift, I think there is this interplay of going back and forth throughout life. But I will say that the more you kind of contemplate or familiarize yourself with these themes in the gene keys, you do tend to start going more towards the gift frequency just naturally over time. Because, as I said, this is working on the DNA structures in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start to recognize when you are acting out of your shadow, when you are reacting, or when you're repressing your nature, if you can kind of put words and language to that and you can understand it more, awareness is key, right? For most
Mm-hmm.
things, more that it's happening and you can identify it. And when you have awareness, that's when you can shift things and change
Mm-hmm.
things,
Because
right?
there's something else.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like just identifying it and saying,
Mm-hmm.
whereas before, if you didn't know, you didn't know. But
Mm-hmm.
any therapy or any process or any personal development, awareness is the first step of like paying attention to your
Mm-hmm.
behaviors. So the more you do it, it starts to leave room, an opening there for the higher frequencies to start expressing, for the gifts to start coming out. And like in this one, the gift is competence, which means that you're someone who is able to really step into the work that you love to do and to realize that no matter what, as long as you are following your path of what's right for you, you will have the tools, you will be able to complete it with competence. And then beyond that is the city, which in this meaning, it's I'll tell you what, I look at
Mhm.
shadow gift a lot. Cynic, will we ever attain the perfection of this? Who knows? But there's always something to know what it's moving towards,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, and so when I first read these, I definitely understood the compromise part.
Mhm.
I think probably most humans understand that. Most women understand that. Most mothers understand that. There's a certain compromise that happens in your life. Quite frankly, as women, I think we're expected to compromise, or at least we
Yeah.
used to be.
Mhm.
We're breaking those molds. But I tried to dig into what competence felt like. Like I said, it's a contemplative thing. You read it and then you just go about your life. And then sometimes it comes back like, what does that actually mean? It says it's
Mhm.
a quality of what somebody who loves doing what they're doing. And I could start to pay attention more if I see it happening in my everyday life of where I feel more competent, to
Mhm.
understand what that is and what that expression is for me, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so as your gift grows, as you step more into that gift frequency more
Mhm.
often,
Mhm.
what actually happens, because it's changing your DNA, it's changing your electromagnetics, it's changing everything. If
Mhm.
you want to talk about the G center, it's helping to calibrate that G center, so your aura starts to grow, your health, your vitality, your opportunities increase, expansion, light, love. You're moving into these higher frequencies all the way out. And so that naturally is going to, like I said, bring more of these things to you, make you more attractive as far as the G center goes, lead you towards
Mhm.
what's right for you, a more, abundant, prosperous life. So basically the Gene Keys in that respect likes to say that it is really the inner language of light
Ooh.
with words. Yes. So it's actually bringing this light into your body, into your DNA, and helping it express itself through your body. So, really, when you are approaching how to quote unquote work with the gene keys, it's not really
Mhm.
work. Like I said, it's a contemplative thing. You get the information, but don't try to approach it in a linear fashion. This is not a book that you open and start at chapter one and read. You can't do that. You don't want to do that. It would just, I mean, you can certainly go on a path of, say, within a year of wanting to work through each, gene key, because we all have all 64 gene keys,
Mhm.
right? You could certainly do that, maybe following it through the year as it is on the mandala. And one really cool thing that is a free uh, resource is on the Gene Keys website, genekeys.com. Well, this is something I just learned about recently. But
Mhm.
say you wanted to work through all of the gene keys, learn about them, go a little bit deeper in the process, you can go to the website. It's genekeys.com/pulse, PULSE, and I'll put a link in
Mhm.
the show notes. And what they will do is you'll sign up to the newsletter. You don't have to,
Mhm.
but you'd have just to go on. We talked about the line days. We talked about the sun going through each one
Mhm.
for 6 days. So what happens is during the 6 day transit where the sun is highlighting a certain gate or gene key, you will
Mhm.
have access through this little thing here, the pulse, that will give you access to the audio contemplations that Richard Rudd has recorded for each
Mm.
one. Where, so there's the Gene Keys book, the text, anybody can buy that. You can go look, but these
Mhm.
contemplations are a little different. He kind of talks through the gift, the shadow, the gift, and the frequency. And so they're free to the public. So right now it's Gene Key 16. From May 27th to June 1st, you'd be able to have free access to listen to that, to contemplate it. And I really, really enjoy those. And so if you get on the newsletter, they'll send you a email when the new one is coming out.
Mm.
Otherwise, you got to remember. But so that's another cool resource there to
Yeah.
kind of work with. You can also go on to the genekeys.com and get your own hologenetic profile. It's free, kind of like you go on My Body Graph.
Mhm.
And it'll give you a little PDF printout of like the four main gates, your incarnation cross gates. It'll kind of walk you through some
Mhm.
of that. It's a lot of resources and information there.
Mhm.
Um, But so, as we were saying, the best way to approach this is to not get too linear at it. Start at the beginning at one and try to go through, either work through it with your own gates and getting a better understanding there, or you can follow the year, or you just open it up. And so you have to use the brain, the mind to read it, to
Mm-hmm.
try and make sense of it, and then don't. Just kind
And
of put it
then sit
aside,
with it.
contemplate, observe your behaviors yourself and see. And then there's nothing, and that's what, he'll be the first one to say, there's nothing really to do here.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like curriculum necessarily to follow or anything. It's just everybody does it in their own different way. Just read different parts as you feel called to do it. And I'll tell you, the 16 right now, that it really blew my mind, like yesterday or the day before, which is why I decided to talk about this, because I
Mm-hmm.
do not have the 16 highlighted in my chart, but I have the 48, which is the other end. And
Mm-hmm.
16 is a bridge gate in my design, meaning I have three bridge gates. I have
Which
the,
means that if you are if you interact with someone that creates that, then you have more centers connected, right?
yes, that's part of it. But really, what it means is that one, I have three of them. If this one gate gets highlighted, one of them 16, one's 20, one's 1. If through other people or through transits this gate is highlighted, it then connects all of my centers to make it single definition.
That's what I had in my head, but that's not how it came out.
Yeah. And so for shadow work, these, if you have two areas, such as myself, of split definition, and it only takes like one gate to get them hooked up, this is going to be a really, really influential shadow energy in my chart. And I read gate 16 the other day, and I was like, holy crap, because I've always been looking at the ones that are highlighted, the ones that I know. I haven't been looking at gene keys that I did not have active, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I did, it's put me on down a whole nother path of like, ooh, I should look at some of these other ones too and see if the shadow frequencies are really. And I saw, and that's what's interesting, is I've been looking at the gene keys for a couple years, and as I said, as I contemplated all these ones that I've become familiar with, just naturally it led me at the right time to the thing I needed was most appropriate at that moment
Mm-hmm.
to hear or to contemplate, was the 16th gene key.
Was there something in specific that once you read it, like some experience or whatever that immediately came to mind with it?
Yeah, I'm going to expose all my shadows here to everybody.
That is why we are here. We are
I
open books.
know, I know. So, yes, the 16th gene key
Mm-hmm.
is, he calls it the magical genius, but it's the shadow is indifference, the gift is versatility, and the city is mastery. But the connection between the 48 and the 16, it goes from the root to the throat, the 1858, and then the 4816, and it's all about mastery over time, right? It's about
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, that 1858 of, creating out of joy and wanting to master something, wanting to become a master at something, your craft or whatever, that you will
Mm-hmm.
continually, through repetition over and over again, try to refine. It's the musical genius, the master crafts, all these things,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is that energy there. And so I have the 48, but I don't have the 16. And what happens to people with that configuration a lot, which I can attest to, is 48 is referred to as the well. You can have a lot of depth, but never feel like you know enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is definitely true. It gets people always stuck and never starting, of never getting there, of never doing the thing, because
Mm-hmm.
you're afraid you just don't know enough. You're not a master, you don't know what you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about.
Mm-hmm.
And so for this shadow, the indifference here, it says, as long as you are indifferent, you can't ever be different.
Ooh.
And it's the human fear of leaving your comfort zone and fully embracing change in your life. It talks about, let's see, where I'm trying to see what I had highlighted here that really stuck out to me. It says, indifference is an energy field created by all the human beings on the planet who are not doing what they would really love to be doing. And the only reason for this state is fear.
Oh. Mm.
And it's making your, here's a good one. Habit of making yourself a victim of time is the core escape strategy of the 16th shadow, but actually time has nothing to do with it because it's just one of those, how I say it all the time. I just don't have the time to get this done or to get that
Mhm.
done. I haven't completed this project yet because, oh, I just don't have enough time. Everybody else
I
has more
have to
time.
spend my time here.
It takes too much time for me to shift gears to do this. So it says you become a victim of the mind. Says the shadow of the 16th gene key can be absolutely full of this is really exposing myself here. Can be absolutely full of plans and good intentions about the world, but they rarely get off the ground. This is the shadow of the pipe dream, the delusion that your dreams will one day become manifest without ever really having to initiate them. And it says, what is lacking in the lives of those in the grip of this shadow is one vital factor, enthusiasm. And that's what they actually call the gate 16 is the gate of enthusiasm, zest, zeal,
Mm.
enthusiasm, is having the enthusiasm, right? So that's just a little, I saw some of that stuff and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so called out. And that's what usually happens when I first read these. I'm like, oh my God, how does they know? How does he know what I've been doing, Um, yeah, actually beginning the work. You have to do it, and so
Mhm.
it's very interesting because it's just about doing the thing, it's like you're just still from my experience of this being a hanging bridge gate there, it is like
Mhm.
showing me how, and another layer in a way of how I'm still letting this feeling of thinking I don't have enough or I don't know enough, I'm making
Mhm.
stories in my head, fear-based things that are keeping me from just doing the thing. And
Mhm.
I've been making progress. I mean, we have been podcasting for a while now, and I'm still
Yes.
doing
Mhm.
things, but there's still lots of things that I have on my wish list, which sounds terrible. It's not a wish list, but it's all my plans that I think I have that I'm just like, oh, I
Mhm.
just don't have time to do them. Well, I am in control of my own destiny, and I'm just, still compromising in certain ways
Mhm.
and also doing some other things that are still shadow frequencies that I'm working through and a lot of that. But, we all are, and we can only
Mhm.
try to do better. And so, called out. Thank you for exposing. Let's expose Haley.
Yes.
So yours is Gene Keys 63. I don't know if this will apply. I think it does, actually. I think I've read this one before. But it's not like they're bad things, they're just
Mhm.
things. Yeah, you know what the shadow is of the 63?
And no, because I don't entirely remember what gate 63 is
It's
other
in the
than a
head.
head gate.
It's a head
Yep.
gate.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not going to use. So let me get back to my book here.
Is this the let's see if I can remember what gate 63 is. Oh, is this the oh man, I can't
Okay, so if you're
remember.
looking at the body graph, okay, maybe
Yes.
this will help get a visual here. If you're looking at your body graph, 63 is the head gate. There's only three
It's
gates,
on the right.
remember? It's
Hmm.
the one on the right, which starts what part, what
Is that
circuitry?
the logic circuit?
Yes, that's logical circuitry. And so in traditional human design, it's called the gate of doubt. And that is
How can I
also
forget my gate of doubt?
quantum human design is curiosity. The
Is
gene
this the one that
keys,
you called the Sherlock Holmes one?
no, that's one in the middle. Um,
Oh, I have that one
uh,
too.
just kind of know it. You have all three of them, I believe. Um, but only the 64 connects to this
Yeah,
47.
I think.
But the shadow frequency of the 63rd gene key is doubt.
It is.
And some of these are really deep. And sometimes, especially if you don't have these, it can be a little bit harder to, or not harder to, or get a better grasping of them because I don't have any activation there at all. I have an
Mm-hmm.
open head center. So it says there is this relationship. So the 63 and the 64 gates, they are kind of tied together, and we know that there's this tied together of logic and imagination, or it's abstract,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the right brain, left brain type thing. But he says that I think it's easier to understand the 63 gate of doubt, gene key of doubt, shadow doubt. And the repressive nature of it is self
Okay.
doubt. Having that self doubt is based upon comparison, and it's a mental conditioning pattern which can eat away at us as anxiety. So if you find yourself worrying a little bit too much, doubting yourself, which, I mean, that's kind of explained too in traditional human design. It's confusion, doubt, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because the other end of it on the human design aspect is gate 4, it's the gate of answers. But gate 63 in traditional
Mm-hmm.
human design is about questioning, right? It starts
Mm-hmm.
the logical process of what would happen if. However, if you are working on the shadow frequency of that, it is like you're having these questions of what if, but it's more directed towards yourself. Does that make sense? What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do? What should I do? What am I doing? You know? Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Mm-hmm.
in the reactive nature is turns into suspicion, doubting everything
Mm.
around you, being
Ah. Mm-hmm.
suspicious of everything around you. It's externally projected outwards. And so it's rooted in self doubt, but it's transformed into anger and taking it out onto others in this more
Mm.
reactive way.
Mm-hmm.
So it says the most common form of suspicion falls upon those closest to us. Projecting our doubts and suspicions on everyone. I don't know. I haven't really seen that much in you.
I don't think I'm a very suspicious person.
No,
I
not
definitely,
particularly.
sorry, I had a piece of ice in my mouth. But no, I definitely feel more on the repressive shadow nature of it.
Hmm.
I doubt myself all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I feel that's pretty common. But then the gift frequency is inquiry, which questioning, you know, and that's what that gate is also designed to do. It's designed to have the questions, to get the ball rolling, sort of have us all contemplating what could happen, what is possible, because it moves down through the circuitry to what is possible, using the imagination to find out, and through repetition and patterns, because it connects over to a lot of other stuff of like, what can we do to improve? How can we create a new reality? How can we create a new future? It's, you know, you're there to ask the questions. And so that's the gift frequency of it, is moving into possibility and inquiry. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, anyways,
Mhm.
that, that was me starting to try and explain the gene keys. And it, you know, if anything, if this rings true in any way, like I said, you can have free access to those
Audio
resources of,
contemplations.
yeah, you can get the contemplations, one every 6 days roughly. You can get your own free hologenetic profile, which will walk you through a little bit of the highlights of your chart. And then he has lots of resources, but I personally have the Gene Keys book, is its own separate book. And then
Hmm.
there are those sequences I talked about, Pearl sequence, Venus sequence, and the activation, the Genius. Those are 3 separate books
Mm.
that deal specifically with how you work through, which we could, you know, do something on that, because it goes a little deeper into, I think it's a really great way also to learn about line expression with the different keys, gene keys or
Mm.
gates, because he really digs into that. But I think a fun one would be to look at the genius sequence of your path, of your golden path with those 4 gates. Maybe we can do the next one. We can do that.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So, anything you want to ask about the gene keys? Usually you just ask me as we're talking, but
Yeah.
I always feel like this is the way you're supposed to wrap up. So, any questions? Anyone have questions? Anyone? No?
I'll take questions from the audience.
Yes. Well, Q&A. Open it up. No. Okay.
Uh, no, I definitely understand the gene keys more. I mean, we have kind of just you've mentioned them when describing other parts of the
Mm-hmm.
chart and things. So it's I
Mm-hmm.
had that familiarity, but this definitely
Mm-hmm.
gave more insight into it.
Well, also in traditional human design, you always hear the talk about keywords, and
Mm-hmm.
there is, built into that, the way Ra developed the system was, if you just knew these certain keywords for each gate, it would help really get to the meaning of it. This is a
Mm-hmm.
deeper level than that. These are real contemplations. Like, he goes into a lot. I mean, I think I don't even know if I've ever gotten through the 55th gene key, which I carry twice, and it's in my unconscious sun and in my unconscious south node, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like 30 pages long. I swear to God, he really goes into a lot of detail, because he says um, the whole transformation that's happening, the evolution that's happening, hinges in this 55th gate. And I haven't ever been able to get really through it. And I can be a deep person, but I do have a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of attention deficit at times. So sometimes I just have to give up and let it go. But I think I have listened to the audio. The audio does help sometimes on certain ones like that. But I will also tell you that I still have to go back many, many times and really just read about the ones for, just the incarnation cross. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think, like a lot of texts you read or teachings that you hear or learn, they change. I really believe they change over time. Like, because you become a different person from when you first read it to the next time
Mm-hmm.
to the next time. Like, how many times have you seen a movie that you've seen before, and you're like, I never remember this
Oh,
part, or I had no idea this, you know?
or you'll catch something else,
Yeah, you get
like I
something
mean,
new
I've
out of it.
I've watched How I Met Your Mother like 7 times all the way through, and I'm still
Which
seeing things. How I
which one?
Met Your Mother,
Oh, yeah.
and so I'm still seeing things that I never have seen before.
Yeah. Well, that's what's been happening all the time. I've been doing all this study of human design, even just my own chart. I will see another person interpret it a different way, or have a different teaching, or just come back to the same one like 3 months later and read it again and be like, oh, I get that a little bit more now. And
You mean like your 16th gene key right now?
yeah, well, I never really looked at that one because I don't have it activated. I've always just been looking at the ones that are like activated a lot of times, and just trying to find that understanding, like we all do. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the journey of it all. I mean, I don't think we'd ever figure it all out of who we are, because I think you're done at that point. You're like, well, I'm out. Peace out. Got it all figured out. I mean, why else would
Yeah.
you need to be here anymore if you feel like you got everything figured out, right?
Yeah.
But luckily, I'm here to try and help. I may not always be able to see myself in my own things, but I do know that I can help other people see them in themselves. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And yeah, I do like to do that. And that's part of my 14th gate, my gene key, that's leading me towards this work, is that I really do enjoy doing that kind of work of helping people see themselves and helping them feel that they can do what it is they want to do, what they're led to do. And that's what my energy is supposed to do when it enters your energy, is to help give you that direction and help you follow what's correct for you, for your own prosperity. And so, anyways, there you go.
Yeah.
So, anyways, okay. Well, that's it for today. I guess maybe
Mm.
next time we'll come back. We might, I don't know if it'll be the next time, but we will come back with maybe walking through that genius sequence to get a little better understanding of
Yeah.
that. But yeah, so
Yeah.
we'll put a pin in it for today. All right, Haley. Well, you have a great rest of your day, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Well, you made it all the way to the end of today's episode, so you must have liked what you heard. If you did, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode, and perhaps leave us a good review. And if you know someone who wants to dig into all things human design with us, make sure you share the Human Design Hive podcast with them. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening.